Hey Rock of Ages, this is Pastor Matt and welcome to our first midweek text study where we are looking at the passage we're going to be considering on Sunday morning. This summer we're doing our services downstairs and the sermon time is going to have a little bit more of a discussion format to it. And so in order to aid in our conversation, we're posting these videos midweek so you kind of get a sense of where the passage is going. And you can bring your questions, your concerns, your critiques off of this video, and we can talk about them on Sunday. So we're looking at Matthew 13, verses 44 through 46, and it's actually two parables. You know, we're in this series called Parables, the stories of Jesus, and today we get two of them, and it's only like 3 verses, so it's real short. So let's read this passage and we'll consider it together. So Jesus says, "The kingdom of heaven is sort of like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So both of these parables begin with this phrase, the kingdom of heaven is like. And it's this, you know, maybe we should just say this off the bat. Let's not take parables beyond what they are. There's a general truth in this parable, and we can take it a little bit further than that. We can consider how it impacts our lives, but not every little detail communicates exactly what the kingdom of heaven is. Okay, it's sort of like this. And so let's just look at the first one. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is sort of like this situation where a man finds treasure hidden in a field. And then he decides, okay, this treasure, I don't want anyone else to have it. I gotta have it. This is so valuable. And he decides, I'm gonna cover this stuff up. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to sell all that I have and I'm going to go buy that field. Why? Because that treasure is more valuable than apparently all that he possesses. And it's just a sound business practice. He's saying this field and this treasure that it contains is worth more than all that I possess. So of course I would give all that I possess in order to get this field and, more importantly, the treasure that it contains. And now check out the second parable. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who, when he finds a particular pearl of extreme value, decides that he's going to go in and he's going to sell all that he has and he's going to buy it. Now, the difference between these two parables is the man in the first one, he isn't even actually looking for treasure. You know, he is digging, but you assume that he's just in a field owned by someone else. Maybe he's digging fence posts, I don't know, a trench, something like that. And he finds treasure that probably a previous owner had dug and buried in that to protect it from, you know, marauding raiders. And he isn't even looking for treasure. He finds it unexpectedly, and then he gives all that he has to get it. This merchant in this second parable, he's actually in search of these pearls. Like, he's devoting his life to finding these pearls, and he eventually finds one, and he says, I gotta have it. I gotta do this no matter what. I need this pearl. And both of these parables, they kind of work together to say, the kingdom of heaven, being in this kingdom, being in a right relationship with God, this is more important than anything else that you could ever possess in this life. You could accrue all the wealth in the world. You could have all the family wealth, all of the power, the cultural prestige. You could have everything that you could imagine in this life, and none of it would be as valuable as having the kingdom of heaven. And that's the basic message of this parable. And so the question that we are left to consider is, what are the things that we are sometimes valuing more than the kingdom of heaven. And would we be willing to give up these things if we were left with that decision? You know, I think back, it'd actually be forward in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, man, listen, if you would be going into hell because your hand caused you to sin and it sent you there, or your feet caused you to sin and they sent you there, or even your eyes caused you to sin and they sent you there, you would gladly, right? You would gladly pluck that eye out or chop your hands off or your feet. You would take that deal in a heartbeat. A everlasting joy is of such immense value compared to a temporal potential suffering. And Jesus, obviously, he isn't saying, hey guys, you want to go to heaven, you're going to have to chop your feet off, your hands, or pluck your eyes out. He's not saying that. He's just drawing a comparison, saying, this thing, you might not value it all as ultimate value. You might not, and you really should, because it is more valuable than anything that this world has to offer. Now, that's the first interpretation of this parable, and it's the primary one, and we need to consider it. And on Sunday, I'm going to invite you to share about how you are finding this battle playing out in your own soul. There's a second way to see this parable, though, and it's to answer the question, who is this man? Who is this merchant? And the main way to answer that is, well, that's us. You know, we are, or rather, this is what we're supposed to be. We are supposed to be these people who value the kingdom of heaven more than the riches of this earth. But there's another way to see this, and I think this is one of those kind of double hearing things, is double entendres, where Jesus is saying one thing, and then as we consider the parable a little bit more, we're like, I wonder if this cuts a different direction as well. And I think it does. I think we can see this in the whole gospel story of this man also being God, and more specifically being Jesus. You know, the kingdom of heaven is sort of like this, as a man who has treasure that's hidden in a field. It's not being enjoyed for what it is. It's tarnished. It's not being productive, and that's the human race. We are this treasure. That's us. And as we consider what God's desire is for us, it is to get this treasure. It's to have it, to possess it, to enjoy it. Like God values us, and he is willing to go and sell all that he has in order to get us. We are these fine pearls, actually this great pearl of immense value. That is us to God. You know, we are sinful people, and we've made such a stinking mess out of our lives, and yet God sees us and he values us, and he's willing to do whatever it takes. He's willing to give up all that he has to give in order to have us. Now, when I see Jesus on the cross and I see what he has done for me and for you, as I see his heart for me, as I see how much he values me, my heart then begins to value him. As we consider the goodness of God, we value him as being good more and more and more. It's easier for us to not value him on the same level as our careers or our families or all of the individual, things that we can acquire in our lives. We see him not on the same level as those things, but of infinitely more value. That there would be a God who would value me causes me to value him. And I think that is what is happening in this parable, as well as the primary call on us to value God. God is showing us how valuable he is because of his heart for us. So as we gather on Sunday, I want you to consider, and if you're not able to make it, I'm sorry, but if you are, I encourage you to come on down and we'll have a good discussion together. But I want you to consider this question. What does God's valuing of you do for your heart as you consider your value of God? How does God counting you as a treasure make you count God as a treasure? And maybe in this, you can also come kind of prepared to answer, what are the things that kind of cloud God's value in your heart? We'll talk about those. And I think we're going to have a good time together considering how we can honor God more, because he really is all that valuable. And he is worth giving up all, because he has given up all for us. All right, so that's the end of our first midweek sermon study. I invite you to come back next week and we'll look at the next parable. And then that next Sunday, we're actually going to be having church at the park. And I'll tell you more about that later. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.